What is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of The Kingdom Says. I am your host, as always, Garrett Williams, and I am joined by my two very beautiful co-hosts, as always. First on my left, your right, we've got Mr. Tom Pike, Arrowhead Tom. How are we doing today, sir?
Wow. You haven't called me beautiful in a while. I feel like we found our spark again. I'm doing well. It's a late night recording, and so we might be a little slap happy, but we're having a good time over here.
We sure are. And also join us, of course, on the bottom of the screen, Mr. Kyle Henning. How are we doing today, sir?
I'm tired, frankly.
Oh yeah. I wonder why.
I drove to Texas yesterday and drove back from Texas today, but I drove farther into Texas today before driving back from Texas today. So it was a whole day.
Yeah, not Texas Roadhouse, actual Texas.
No, actual Texas. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I moved a buddy down there, and then
just remember, if you go to Texas Roadhouse, medium well.
Don't do it. Nope, you're not going to do that.
You're not going to do that.
If you like steak, you're going to be a normal.
If you like steak, don't do that.
If you want a good steak, you're going to order a medium rare. Anyways,
if you want a car tire, do whatever Tom said.
Yeah, if you want dog food, follow Tom's method to a T.
And country, you can take offense to that too if you'd like, because I know you're going to watch this, or listen to this, one of the two.
So, very beautiful day here in Chiefs Kingdom because we have a W in the.
The drive was much easier because we played better on Sunday.
It's nice to have a win, which
we're back in first place in the AFC West.
Yeah,
I think so. That wasn't too long of a.
Technically, I think the Raiders have the tiebreaker because they beat a conference opponent. If you wanted to get down to the nitty gritties,
I guess that's fair.
We're tied first in the division at the moment, because the NFL doesn't do that crap until the playoffs. So
of course,
gotta wait to beat the Raiders. All right, that's fine.
No!
But yeah, the Chiefs came out victorious on Sunday versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. They shook it off, shook off the rust. They found some open space, blank space.
You're having fun with this, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. All the
sure are.
Make.
Yeah, I don't know too many any other songs, so that's
Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift thing is gonna make my.
I guess you could say that they were probably teardrops on those Jaguars.
Guitars.
Is that a song? I don't know.
Lord, yeah, it's a song.
Swift songs, but yeah, we got a lot to talk about here today. First and foremost, before we even talk about the game, there was some news that came out after the game. Patrick Mahomes restructuring his contract. Very interesting news. Basically, just no new money in the deal from what was reported. It's just they're moving money from the back end of that big old $500 million deal up to the next 4 years. So I believe it's $210 million over the next 4 years.
Don't forget the .1.
Was it a .1?
There's a .1 because it's $100,000 more than Lamar Jackson. They made very certain to say that, like 6 times.
Of course. Yeah.
Yep.
So
he has $100,000 more in cash flow coming to him in the 4-year stretch than Lamar does. That
huge.
Was because
absolutely huge for the program.
Because Garrett, we're talking about the deal. They waited for everybody else's crap to get done so that then they could make Florio shut up.
Yeah, Joe Burrow hit his new contract.
It's weird. They didn't announce the deal like right before the Bengals game. I thought that was what we were doing.
They should have, just right at kickoff. Boom.
But
yeah. So good to see. Obviously, it also freed up, I think, $2.5 million in cap space this year.
Why they did it?
Yeah,
and
so just good operating costs for the season because we were a little low on that. We were a little low.
Depending on, I still haven't seen the actual structure of the contract yet, and we won't probably for a little while until it has time to come out. But I would expect it to be roster bonuses. Ryan Tracy said something to the effect that it sounded like they kept it all structured. The actual way it's set up is the same. They just moved the money forward. So technically, they should be able next year to dip into that well a little easier because what I think they've done is moved a bunch of that money, as Garrett said, from the years, especially I think 2027, he was supposed to have like a $72 million cap hit and something like $97 million coming to him that year. And I think they probably took a good chunk of that and moved that up into this portion of the deal. So it gives them flexibility, and I thought it was interesting and I noticed it immediately that he tweeted what a certain someone else tweets every freaking dang near day when he got the deal done, when they renegotiated it. That was his tweet about it.
Ironic, huh?
I was like,
Yeah.
That's interesting. And then Ryan and Dan were talking about it on RGR. See, I had a few hours in the car, boys and girls, so I had some time to
did you?
some things. And this was my initial thought when I saw the tweet was, and Chris tweeted basically the same thing, I think, right afterwards, after he congratulated Pat. I'm not so sure that if they structured this the way that I think they did and the way Ryan seems to think they did, that doesn't give them even more flexibility in next year's cap to where they don't have to worry about tagging him because it doesn't affect them because they've got enough cap space to play with that it just simply doesn't matter. Yeah, especially with the expected cap growth. So it's Patrick is I'm almost, I would be willing to say Patrick was sending a message with that tweet. And I think Chris's response and the other's response was a similar message back with a message received on the other end kind of deal.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that had been mentioned was with the moving the money and the reshuffling was that I'm going to blank on who pointed this out, but one of the things that I believe has happened is instead of the option to trigger the we've talked about the automatic mechanisms, bonuses and, freeing up,
the guarantee mechanisms. Yeah.
So they moved that, like the timeline of that during the season. That's
different.
Not during the season, excuse me. So that deadline is now in March versus May. And so that gives them the opportunity to do that, before free agency, before
the draft,
franchise tag, before all that stuff. So in theory, the biggest benefit is they now have that flexibility as a team earlier in the calendar year to decide, hey, you know what? We are going to tag Chris this year. Here's some extra cash for you, and we've got more cap space. Or, you know what? We're going to hold on to that. We'll roll it over, and we'll just keep rolling.
Also, I think we can be done with the Clark Hunt doesn't like spending money conversation now because he just moved like $100 million forward 4 years.
Yeah,
and he did so.
The checkbook just a little bit.
Yeah,
about time, about dang time. I'm just playing, but good to see Pat back in the top money for a quarterback. That can stop being a dumb conversation.
My last thing, they were always going to go look at that contract again in 2027. So them saying they're going to go look at it again in 2027 is 0% news.
Not news.
Just everybody stop panicking about they're going to look at it. Yeah, no kidding. That was always the plan.
Yeah, I think it was 2026. It was reported they're going to look at it again. So
because 2027 is that year that's just stupid, absurd, broken, big, all that crap.
Yep. So that being said,
the cap is expected to expand, and all of those things are going to happen, and so there's a reason why there's a method to their madness. So
and Brant Tillis is a god. Other than that,
and it probably actually is like. $10, $15 million capping. We just don't know it yet, because they're just wizards, So, with that being said, Jaguars game, not the probably expected outcome, but it was a win,
Well, it definitely wasn't what you and I predicted.
Definitely not even, we were not in the right stratosphere. If you were looking at my bets and my parlays, they were not even close. They were not in that right stratosphere as well.
I would have never.
I feel like you need to start sharing your parlays on the podcast so we can bet against them.
I mean, that's kind of a bad idea. I've actually stopped doing the parlays, and now I'm just individually betting every single thing so then I just don't get screwed. It's a little, you don't make as much, but you're more consistent. I know.
We've got more content like that coming out, Tom. Don't worry.
I'll probably start doing a fade Garrett picks because they never hit. It's incredible.
We've got some content coming out like that, Garrett. You know this. We've talked about it.
Yeah, but Jaguars game, the defense, I think the highlight of the game for sure, having Chris Jones back on the defense. That defensive line, man, it's crazy. It's getting pretty good. The entire defense absolutely balling out, but the pressure generated from that D-line with Chris Jones back, you have George Karlaftis, who was all over the backfield. You have King Felix back there, who is one of the best rookie defensive ends as far as pressures in the NFL. So
he
far
was second in PFF grade for rookies pass rushers behind Will Anderson only this week.
Yeah, is that good? I think so. Yeah, and then Mike Dana still having a great. Yeah, I mean they were living in the backfield with Trevor Lawrence. It's
Mike Dana.
Oh yeah,
Mike Dana. I'm not alone in this camp. Many people thought this. I thought we were kind of at the top of Mike Dana's ceiling last year. And we've seen another level, and he continued. I don't say that to say that I think he's limited. There's only so much you can teach yourself and develop from a technique standpoint, and he's very good technique wise, which is part of the reason he's dominating guys right now. But he's even taken it to another level. You're seeing him be more physical, I think, this year than we've seen in years past. He's more aggressive in where he's going and what he's doing, because I think he's just more confident in where he's going and what he's doing. So he's getting there faster. He's not thinking, he's just playing. And when guys start to just play and don't have to think, it's when you start to see them really go.
Yeah, it's good to see that they're just
so much stronger than what they had. I don't know. I know last year he was, missed all the time with injuries and all that. I don't know if he just had a really good rehab or what, but and contract years undefeated, but man, he has looked like a different player. Just a step up kind of player.
He's kind of the floor of the defensive line has really been elevated this year. It feels like with his development and just everybody just stepping up another level. It's really impressive to see George Karlaftis. I mean, he had a really good game. He is really going to turn into something. I think he's got the juice. He's got the repertoire of pass moves. I mean, it's real fun to watch him play, especially having Chris Jones back there. It's like, man,
he's the guy that gives me the most interest in being a pure complement for what Chris does. Like, they complement each other really well. Felix is going to do Felix things. He's a different style of rusher than George. They've got a bunch of different style guys. But I think for a pure complement to what Chris does, especially because they can switch where they line those two up pretty much interchangeably from an inside to outside perspective, and you saw that on Sunday.
Yeah.
They were moving guys all over the place.
They crush the pocket towards each other a lot of the time, whether it's George from the outside, Chris from the inside, whether it's and I've noticed a lot of the times they're not necessarily side by side, which I'm curious to see what that looks like when a Minihue's back.
Yeah.
They're almost going to have too many guys. Like, it's just going to be, all right, who needs a break? Who's going to be the fresh legs? All right.
And I want you to talk more about George. I want you to talk more about George, Tom, because you have some more nuanced stuff on him, I'm sure. But
yeah,
I just think they need to basically hold a pass rush summit with Tom Bahali in the summer at this point, because I know George has been working with him, and Tom and if Mike wants to take his hands to another level, even from what we've seen this year, that would be the guy to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just on that conversation of George, gosh, I mean,
golly,
young kid, right? And it's one of those things, like you talk about the nuance. I think
young in football too.
Yeah, you can see a difference in. I mean, the guy we talked about, like, he's not a slouch athletically. He never was, but he just looks different this year.
I still didn't know you could teach bend, but apparently you can.
Yeah, apparently you can teach flexibility.
I had this conversation with Andrew Spurl, who is Travis Kelce's one of Travis Kelce's trainers or whatever, workout coaches, whatever you want to call it, on Twitter about. I was like, I genuinely did not know you could teach bend, but apparently Bobby and Tamba and those have figured out how to teach bend. And he's like, I don't know that you can teach it. I'm like, well, I don't know that you can either, but I'm watching it. So
yeah, but we're seeing it. Well, it's not just the bend. It's so George last year, and even coming out as a prospect, like, he was a very straightforward kind of bull in a china shop, like, just stronger than everybody else. Yeah,
he's a power rusher.
And he had moves to his game, but he is tying it all together. And so you talk about the bend, like, he's still not Von Miller.
He ain't never going to do what Felix can do from a bend perspective.
He's finally transitioning that power into something else, though.
Yeah, and he's got enough now where he understands I don't have to be the bendiest guy. I just got to get him to get that, like, get to the edge, get that outside
Fear.
shoulder
Get that
He can
leverage
put the
on.
fear in him.
Then I crash in. And that guy is expecting me. Like, you just got to. You don't have to be able to bend. You just have to convince the other guy that you can.
We
You
talked
just have
about
to threaten it. Yeah, you just have to have the threat of the bend, and you're good.
We talked about this with him before the draft. Before he was drafted, Tom and I had this conversation, and we've had it about 6 times last year. And it was the first 3 times we had it, I was concerned, and the last 3 times we had it, it was I'm finally starting to see it. His ability to convert his threat of a speed rush to his bread and butter, which is the power rush. Mm-hmm. He is converting speed rush to power rush much better and at a much higher rate, partially because his hands are better, and partially because he is more flexible around that edge and puts more threat into that outside shoulder than he was capable of doing the year previous. I didn't know if we were going to ever get there because I didn't know you could teach somebody to be, like I said, I didn't know you could teach somebody a skill like that, because even though he doesn't have to necessarily bend the edge, he can now, because we've seen him do it, not fantastically and not traditionally, but we've seen him do it a couple of times and be successful with it. So they have to be an account for it. Now that he has that, he can do all kinds of things in the power game.
You know, another guy.
Essentially, there's 3 routes to a quarterback: inside, through, or around. Right, when you're going to a tackle or a guard, and last year, George's routes were essentially inside, an inside move, or through, and now he's got the third, which is going around, and he really has owned that, and we see him getting out. He just, and I think that's the other thing to talk about, just like being able to play and not think. He looks like another guy who's just developing some of those really natural instincts, some really heads up plays, and
he's only been playing football for like 7 or 8 years. He's crazy.
Another guy who's been outside on that edge, who's been real bendy, and who also might happen to be white. Leo Chanel has been having a real good start to this season. I'll tell you what. They've been using him outside on the end. He had how many pressures?
He had 8 pass rushing snaps. He had 4 pressures.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty high hit rate right there.
50% ain't bad, kids.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we saw this in training camp. That we saw that they were using Chanel and Willie in a pass rushing philosophy. But now we're seeing it in a game, and man, it's pretty impressive to watch. I'll tell you that much. He's got a lot of juice. He's not even that big of a guy, but he has a power aspect to him.
That dude is strong as an ox. What are you?
Exactly. That's just the big. He is just strong as hell, and he's quick. He's got a lot of good traits that you want in an edge rusher, and he kind of knows what he's doing too.
Physicality.
But he also has a plan. It seems like. There's a couple of snaps you really watch. Like this guy's rushed the passer before. Obviously, Wisconsin. Smart. I think they used him in kind of that way as like a Sam linebacker type deal.
His football IQ is really high. He's smart, and the thing that I'm so happy about is I have talked about on this podcast the 3-3-5 and the NASCAR for 4 years now with Spags.
Turning left.
4 years now. I've been begging and begging and begging. You're seeing it because I think half of those snaps from Chanel were out of a 3-3-5 with him on that little over ledge as the fourth guy.
Mm-hmm.
Man, and they used Willie some. He's not as good at it as Leo is, and I'm not surprised because that's far more in Willie's.
Willie's a good blitzer, but he's not.
But he's not a pass rusher.
Yeah,
Leo can. I watched Leo take a tackle and put him in Trevor Lawrence's lap.
Yeah, pretty easily too.
It wasn't hard. He was just picking up hay and putting them on a truck. Right
there. Let me put her over here now.
And if you try to block him with a tight end, I have news for you. It isn't going to go well for your tight end.
And not only, pass rushing him was really impressive, but also just like Kyle was talking about, his IQ. That one little throwback play that they had where they tossed it back and then they threw it across the field. He identified that thing right away, saw that the tackle was, not blocking him anymore, and just instantly turned around and make that tackle behind the yard. Like that was impressive.
And got to him, by the way. Had the athleticism to get the
I mean, he burst to that guy, and he
can go 3 directions now. He still struggles with backwards a little, but he can go left, right, and forward, and diagonally in those directions. He can even go diagonally backwards fine for the most part. Just don't go straight backwards, please. Please don't go straight backwards.
I honestly think that was one of the most impressive plays.
The diagnosis and then the reaction and then getting there. Oh yeah,
I mean that was pretty game changing. If he doesn't react to that could be a big pickup for them.
Yeah, that could have popped wide open.
It's like 40 yards, dude. He had.
But there's no one else behind him.
Just that he did it so well, but it was also his growth as a player, because last year I don't think he makes that play.
No.
But just you talk about assignment sound football and containing the edge and containing the perimeter.
Yeah, that was a perfect container.
Honestly, as a football player, right? Like it's one of the most boring, like in a lot of ways, 99% of the time that play unfolds that way.
We used to watch
our left standing on your side, watching, going, okay, cool. They did a pitch over there. I could have ran over and maybe made a play, but coach wants me to stay here and contain. But to understand, like, hey, I have to actually do my job. And if I overshoot, if I'm over aggressive, if I over pursue, I'm going to hurt the team. And then for that 1% of the time when that ball gets thrown back and they're running some trickery and he's there to make it, that's what it's about.
That's what you train for, right there.
Of sport. Because they were banking on him to be over aggressive and for him to over pursue, and he didn't.
Most of our lives as Chiefs fans have been spent with very good edge rushers who had no patience or ability to stay home on the back half. John Elway has a Hall of Fame career because we have defensive ends that couldn't remember that he was going to bootleg out the back door like 17 times a freaking game. Like, I remember viscerally most of my life watching this defense get absolutely abused by the stuff that Andy Reid does to other defenses all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to drive me insane. Guys, they do it to you in practice like 500 times. You would think we would put something in our playbook to stop the other team from doing that thing. Well, they have it. The guy has to stay home. But as Tom said, that's really hard to do because, as he mentioned,
it's not fun.
The ball's going that way, coach. And
see ball, get ball, but sometimes it's not that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of those few times where like staying home and really sticking to your assignment, it pays off. Other time it might not pay off, and they might just run it to the other side of the field, and
that's fine because you still did your job.
Yeah, exactly. You still did exactly.
But at some point in the season, some poor soul at quarterback is going to line up and look across the line of scrimmage, and he's going to see the combination of Chris Jones, Charles Omenihu, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, and Leo Chenal just hanging out, just lurking around. And he's going to go, okay, and he's going to go set his protections, and he's just going to go 1, 2, everyone block. And he's probably just going to decide to take a knee. That's
Max Pro on that one.
Yeah, we're going to go Max Pro.
The A-gap options that Leo presents you in a traditional four-man front, if you can get him on the field to come out of it with a blitz from an A-gap package, he's basically an extra lineman rusher at that point. Because, look, nothing against centers. But traditionally, they're usually the smallest offensive linemen on the field, generally speaking. Yeah. And they're also the most vulnerable because they start out with the ball in their hand and their head down.
Yeah.
Got to take advantage of that with an athletic guy like that. So
now,
the linebackers played really well. The defensive line played really well.
The secondary,
guys, the secondary played pretty well. I will say Trent McDuffie had a good game. The Jaguars definitely were targeting L'Jarius Sneed very often in that game.
They're testing him. They're going to keep testing him. With him being on the injury report with the knee and people talking about his knee, he's going to keep getting tested.
Yeah, he sure did get tested.
I'm not mad about it because go ahead, test him. Go fine. Go ahead. Till he proves otherwise. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I mean, he had some good
You're
reps.
making him lots of money next year, and it ain't gonna be in Kansas City most likely if it's a lot of money because they can't afford a lot of money for him and Chris and everything else. Because remember, they've got
or maybe they can.
They've got Nick, Creed, and Trey next year too, most likely. So Patrick did just give them a lot of money. We talked about that earlier.
So secondary. It was a good look from the secondary.
We talked about Leo staying home. The secondary did too. And what I mean by that is they ran some different. The Jaguars, Doug Peterson's an Andy Reid disciple. He ran some things that we've seen out of our own offense on some misdirection and the motion and the stuff that can confuse and has confused this defense before. It did not confuse them at all one bit whatsoever Sunday. They gave up 9 points, and one of the drives they gave up a field goal on started inside their 40, 35, 30. It was
the
close.
Epitome of a bin note break, and just hats off to those end zone performances because they shut it down.
Oh yeah, the red zone was a lock.
I made
that's
the
what
joke
Spags wants.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence, it's going to be dangerous for the Chiefs player quarterback who can throw into the red zone instead of out of the back of it. But genuinely, he was throwing because he was throwing those balls up because he had nowhere else to go, and he was just hoping to catch a PI.
I did see someone say if the end zones were 11 yards deep instead of 10, they'd have 4 touchdowns. But they're not.
Sure would.
That's not how it works.
But here's the thing: that's called excellent defense. As a matter of fact, on 2 of those balls. I believe the one that Trent made the play on Zay Flowers, the last one, in the back of the end zone.
Zay Jones?
Zay Jones. Sorry, there's too many Zays and too many last names that are the same, and they're all fairly young and new to AFC teams, if I'm not mistaken. So
Zay Flowers, Ravens,
yeah. He excellent receiver. He's looks like one of Lamar's new favorite targets, I think. From what I've seen, and especially with Odell being hurt, but we'll see how that goes. Trent took away the initial pass because Trevor was ready to go to Zay at the front of the end zone on the initial play to start with, and Trent dove hard on it to stop that from happening. Then that's when Zay leaked to the back and went around, and Trent had to recover and get back, but he got back in perfect position to get underneath Zay's body to where. By the way, they took the rule out where you can't push them out anymore. You can shove them straight out of bounds now again, like you used to be able to. Remember there for 8 years, you couldn't push people out of bounds when they were in the air, and it would.
I always thought that was the best play to do. If they're in the air, just hold them up and push them out of bounds.
If you can catch a dude and carry him out of bounds without putting his feet down, go ahead.
Who cares about playing the ball? But impressive performance by the defense for sure. The offense, on the other hand, it definitely looked a little shaky. We don't have to get too deep into it because it was pretty. I mean, they figured it out in the second half a little bit. This first half really couldn't find their rhythm, but couldn't find their route, and also they didn't run the ball. I mean, they ran 2 run plays I think in the entire first half. Now I'm no expert, and I know
it's not balanced.
We got Patrick Mahomes, but you might want to run the ball a couple more times.
Some of that is Patrick, some of that is Andy, some of that is both. I mean, is what it is on the running side of it. They had other issues besides not running the football in the first half, and all of them included what we saw a couple of times last year, which was pulling out the 12 gauge and blowing their toes off.
I mean, it's a classic.
A nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Look.
Double lot.
They went to the Plaxico Burris School of Firearm Responsibility.
Jawan Taylor was targeted. Yes.
Yes,
he was. Jawan Taylor also did not have a great day. Because he had a fine blocking day. He did not have a great day. There's a very different thing between those two. He's excellent in pass protection. I don't have a problem with that at all. He's also pretty good in the run game.
Penalty acquisition.
He had trouble adjusting, and it's funny because Andy mentioned it in the press conference. That's the same crew they had at training camp. And they talked to him about it at training camp. So that means he knows. Now, was it probably hyper? Hold on.
Now, hold on.
Wait a minute. I just told you he was targeted, didn't I? Patrick also said he was picked on. Quote. That's a Patrick quote. I didn't call him picked on. I called him targeted.
Quote.
Patrick called him picked on.
Quote, end quote.
Mine's not as professional. Patrick chose the good route to not get a $25,000 to $50,000 fine from the NFL for talking badly about the officials.
Jawan Taylor had a good day. You know, he didn't. The penalties were definitely tough, and there was at one point where
they pulled him for a couple snaps so that he could get his head clear because he was clearly in his head.
A couple snaps, and then they brought him back in,
and it's perfectly fine. And and the other thing that I mentioned is
after that.
It was 1,000 freaking degrees in Jacksonville. Travis Kelce was struggling with hydration, as you could. I mean, you could physically look at him and tell.
I think Justin Watson needed an IV.
Watson had cramps at the end of the game. That's why
we were talking about. We were talking about in the group chat how Jawan Taylor used to play in Jacksonville, so he should be good. But it is different. But Justin Watson also used to play in Tampa. Same deal. So maybe the Florida boys actually aren't as durable as the Midwest.
Trent said it was worse than St. Joe this year. So
that's pretty high bar.
And St. Joe sucked this year. For those of you who were not around for St. Joe this year, it was
100 degrees most days.
115 to 119, depending on when and what day you're talking about. For a couple weeks of that portion, sucked.
But outside of that, Jawan Taylor, pretty decent game. Donovan Smith on the other end also had a pretty decent game. He caught a ball. Shout out to him. Well, it didn't count because that's not allowed.
It counts because they declined the penalty, so the reception counts. That's why the reception counts. They declined the penalty.
That's sick. That's pretty sick. Good for him. Yeah.
So he will be the answer to a trivia question in 20 years. Name an offensive lineman that caught a pass from Patrick Mahomes but didn't count for anything.
All right, now hold on.
I want to
go back. I want to go back to this Jawan Taylor penalty.
Okay.
And this is my,
and the holding calls were soft as hell. Both him and
the holding calls were very soft. I didn't do any clown ratings during the game, but I might have to start. And most of them are going to be Chiefs.
Your own fan base. Yeah.
Or overreacting. And especially, and I mean this, you know what? I don't mean this respectfully. I mean this disrespectfully. If you are going to tweet these terrible takes, it's very clearly you don't know ball. And I'm not saying I know ball that well, but you don't know ball. Let me tell you right now, when a player at that caliber, right? And here's the thing, and we talked about it, yes. Them jumping, we talked about this before the Super Bowl with Lane Johnson. There was complaints about, the Eagles doing this.
He did it Thursday, a whole all-day Thursday.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so the NFL decided they wanted to address us only because the people
Chris Collinsworth is an annoying.
No. I mean, it was he was doing. It was a good job on his end to
I will not
call it out and point it out.
But you can.
He had
fill in the blank on that.
He had a pretty good line one of the times. He was like, Jawan Taylor, they're lined up at slot receiver. That was pretty good line.
That was pretty.
That's
funny.
Fine. He also didn't talk about the other side lined up the same way in the same freaking game. So,
but just like the NFL doesn't like it when the players talk bad about their refs, their little baby refs. They don't like it when the anybody else does it. And when there's a clear, obvious, it's an embarrassing thing. So that's why they want to clear it up, right? They don't actually care about it. I will tell you right now, I have sat on the sidelines of a high school football game. This happens at every level. Where when you want to talk about a offensive tackle being lined up at wide receiver, I've seen guys,
I'm more deep,
3 yards behind the center.
Yeah.
I mean, this man, you couldn't turn his head and couldn't find the center butt cheek. So I'm just it happens at every level, and it's going to vary based on every crew. Most of the time, in the beginning of the game, your offensive lineman, if they're struggling with it, you'll get a warning here or there.
Like a wide receiver
will say, "Hey, come, check this out. Make sure this isn't good." The jumping thing, okay, that's tough. But
I mean, the one time he did mistime it.
Oh yeah, one time he did.
Yeah, but you're relying on the communication of your team, right? Your mental processing, and just knowing that the way that human eyes work is, you have to look at the ball and then look at your tackle and make sure it all syncs up and go, oh, he is offsides, right? It's just an advantage. It takes skill. I would love to see your average person try to time their jump off a snap to the half a second. Is it a half a second that he's technically offside? Sure. Is it something that gives him an advantage? Yeah. Does every elite offensive tackle try to do that or try to incorporate that into the game if they can? Hell yes. The problem
some of it is dependent on
is when you have a player who is singled out, and I understand they had other players on the tape, but that they might as well have just called it the Jawan Taylor rule at that point.
They stuck his face on it and rolled that memo out. You can say they had other players in it all you want.
Yep, and that has an effect on a referee crew, right? Because they're professionals. They work for the NFL. Their job is to make the NFL look as good. Yeah, and there's a psychology there. So the frustration to get the penalties, yes, but it also wasn't an ideal or a fair. It probably was a pretty predictable situation. I didn't think there would be that many. I figured he would get a warning or two and maybe one or two penalties or whatever, but they were the penalties from the start.
It was the timing, and it was the fact that they also got they always seemed to kill a drive, and then they got stacked on top of each other in a section there where it was like false start, holding, false start, and like I said, the holding was not holding, but that's a subject.
Yeah, that one holding call was real weak.
I mean, when it's 3rd and 17, you got Will Anderson lined up one-on-one, nose from you. He's paid to eat. What are you supposed to do? You're gonna mistime your snap a little bit.
So the other part is, and the thing that we didn't talk about that was a problem for this team in this game that we've seen be a little bit weird before in times in the past, but that cannot continue. I love Creed. He does a lot of things really well. The snaps have got to get figured out.
Got to figure out the little snaps.
Well, Patrick is not a shortstop.
Because I think that was a problem on both sides of the team. Like, I wonder if it was the humidity on the field. Or just, I think.
And that also may affect Jawan Taylor and his get off the ball, because the other thing you have to remember is if he's going off Pat's cadence, Creed has to react at the same time or before Jawan does for Jawan to not be offsides. So if he's going as close to that cadence as possible and is likely anticipating the cadence because he knows Pat's cadence at this point, he's got to have Creed almost has to start anticipating that cadence as well, because otherwise sometimes, and this is true especially when there's 11 people that have to move at the same time.
Maybe everyone anticipate the cadence, Maybe
that's
everyone.
The thing, though. This is
no one
the
can
thing.
false start.
This is the stuff that nobody really. Everything but the center false start is exactly what that is. By the way, every time you hear or see an everyone's false starts but the center, that's because the center didn't react in time to the cadence.
Yeah.
I mean, offensive line played. It was a decent showing from them. The wide receivers
fantastically. They didn't do a lot.
We saw some good work from the wide receivers.
Yeah, I said they get cleaned up. I think that the game looks different too. Just from a perspective.
They score like 35 points.
Yeah. The wide receivers still have some work to do. I think Kadarius Toney got force fed a little bit there, and that was good. And then we didn't see much more of them. Justin Watson continues to be wide receiver 1.
It was hot, and Kadarius was not having a good time with his conditioning because it was hot.
Yeah, that is something to factor in. But MVS was pretty much non-existent. Sky Moore had a big catch, so that was good to see from Sky. Justin Ross didn't see any time. Richie James dropped a pass and a punt, so that was not fun.
Rashee Rice had a good catch. I'm officially starting the campaign for more Rashee Rice. I would like
Rashee Rice in his limited availability and his limited usage has excelled. I mean, a lot more than some of these guys have. So
Richie has another day like that. Richie won't be here much longer.
You might be getting traded to the Cowboys, Richie. You better.
I don't even know. That was from our conversation earlier in the group chat that none of you were in. But we'll be able to see some of that stuff soon because it'll be in Discord channels near you.
With all the hot local singles that I'm bringing with me, I guess.
Hey, yo.
Tom's in charge of the hot local singles, I guess. That's not my category. My wife might listen to this podcast.
Okay. What are we talking about here? Richie James?
He's on this team to return punts and whatnot, right? Yeah. Like, that's your job.
Maybe get a tinted visor.
He lost it in the sun. I saw it as soon as he looked. As soon as
Yeah.
I saw the close up of the
You still wear
replay.
that?
No.
Guys,
There's
don't
rules
get
on
stuff.
tints. I think you have to have medical clearance for certain tint amounts or whatever.
Richie, we need you to hurt your eyes. All right, we need medical.
Well, he keeps looking at
medical-
that Jacksonville sun. He's gonna be plenty of eye. He's gonna be walking
the sun for a little while.
He'll be walking into the optometrist's office like this.
Get the.
If you are listening to this podcast and happen to be an optometrist and are willing to forge a note saying that Richie James has
actually, though, very interesting to kind of think about. But this is the Chiefs. That was the only Chiefs noon game of the year, so we might not have to worry about that the rest of the year. The sun's gonna be lower than right in the. So it was 1 o'clock.
That's fine.
Local time, so
cannot be dropping.
Got to take that in consideration. The sun.
Nor can you be dropping passes.
Yeah, well, the 2-for-1 spell. I mean, that was tough. That was tough to have the twofer, but hopefully he'll pick it up.
He's on this team for that purpose. You are an absolute pull lever in case we have an emergency at wide receiver, and be on special teams. And if you were having trouble with special teams,
that's tough. Yeah.
And you come out and struggle at the wide receiver position, what's the point of you being here? And it's no offense. Exactly. I'm not trying to hate. But you only have so many roles. You can't have problems at them.
Exactly. Last man that we got to talk about here, who also made his season debut, which was a little quiet on the day. Travis Kelce did have a touchdown, so that's very good to see. But other than that, kind of was a little bit limited on the snap count. We saw a lot of Noah Gray still, and then just kind of.
Let me ask you guys this: give me your percentage of healthiness that Travis Kelce was Sunday.
65%.
Yeah, probably about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty close. I think I'm in that. He was just healthy enough that they couldn't keep him out because he wouldn't let them, and that was about
it.
And
they did enough to get the W.
Yeah, definitely not full free, but at least you have him out there to have the threat of Travis Kelce. They'll automatically draw another person towards him. So
if you haven't yet and you're listening to this, go listen to Only Weird Games' episode from Monday. Nate talked about the dichotomy in the locker room afterwards between Chris and the defense and Travis. And why was Travis angry and trying to hurt things on Sunday? Because he didn't feel very good and was hurting and was mad. That's why. Natural thing. Andy mentioned it in the press conference, but you got like 60% of Travis probably on Sunday.
Probably. So we'll see the progression. He'll keep making progress back. He'll keep healing
I hope
up.
they just leave him limited all week and practice every week from right now, because I don't think you're going to see him a Hyundai until after the bye week.
Yeah. So with that being said, that's about all we've got for you today. Before we go on here too long, good little post-game review of the Jaguars game. We are going to have a very special guest on
pretty soon.
By the time you hear this, pretty soon, yeah. For the next episode, we'll have a very special guest on previewing the Bears game and getting his overall thoughts about the season. But until then, be sure to follow us on all of our socials, Kingdom Says Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out our YouTube, Kingdom Says Podcast. Also, we've got a new episode of Kingdom Recon dropping this Friday. So be on the lookout for that. Tom and the boys had a good time tonight filming that. So, we've got a lot of content coming for you the rest of the week up until the Bears game on Sunday. So should be a good rest of the week. With that being said, thank you all so much for tuning in on this one, and we will see you guys on the next episode of the King.